Okay, this one's about taking an old halogen and turning it into an LED. And I come up with this little way to do this. This is kind of fun, and so I'll just show you how I've made these things into LEDs. Here's the first thing I'm going to do, and of course the castings on these things, you know, they're not all the same. But in general, what I do is I cut a 2 1/8 inch hole in the very center of the fixture. Okay, here you can see I went ahead and cut the hole in this thing, and it's ready for mounting the light. Okay, once I got that hole cut, I file this down or sand it down with a sander, whichever you want to do, because I want the heat sink's going to fit right here. So I have kind of filed this down and got it fairly level there. It's going to do two things. One, it'll contact whatever heat sink I use and make this be part of the heat sink, and it gets the LED closer down here so I don't get so much reflection out of these holes. Okay, this is showing a little farther along. I put a heat sink down here. Where do you see what I use for a heat sink? You know, I drilled the hole. I put the heat sink down there. This is the LED. This is 50 watt. It's going to go somewhere like right in there. So I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes and get this thing mounted in there. Okay, I've drilled holes in this to mount this thing on there, and so the next thing I'm going to do is get my heat transfer paste on this thing. You notice this really isn't step by step. I kind of go through things and then I come back and show you what I did. This is kind of a mechanical thing, and so you're going to have to figure out how to do the mechanics of this on your own. It's just kind of a fun operation. I'll show you what I use for a heat sink here in a little bit. But now I've got this ready to mount right there, and we'll get it hooked down. Okay, before I get too much farther, I just kind of wanted to go over where some of all this stuff comes from. This is all from China. 50 watt LED. I also, after much experimentation, decided to use the driver. You can make drivers if you want to out of voltage regulators, but when you get everything together, this you can run from anywhere from 120 volts to 220 volts. So it's just the best way to do it. These things are really cheap. I think I bought both of these together for about $12, $14. I bought several of them, so it's hard to, I can't remember all of them that I bought and what the prices were for all of them. But just using this little driver and this, and I want you to notice what I've actually made this heat sink out of. This is just an old casting, an old pot metal casting I had, and it'll probably work pretty good. At least I'm hoping it will. And some of the smaller ones I have to put a fan on. I don't think I'm going to have to put a fan on this. The biggest ones of these are 100 watt that I've seen, and I got to have a fan on every one of those. Remember, it's an LED, not supposed to put out a lot of heat, but it actually does put out a fair amount of heat. This, if you leave this thing without a heat sink, it will be too hot to touch within just a couple, 3 seconds. So you do have to have some kind of heat sink on them. I kind of did this heat sink just because I thought it was just kind of funny. We'll see how well it works, and I'll do some tests on it when it's done. So anyway, I'm going to continue on with this thing, and I'll show you a few more things as we go along. Okay, a little farther along with this thing, I've got the driver installed here. And I just mounted this on a little piece of wood. Otherwise it would short with our fancy heat sink here. And I'm going to wire this in. There's kind of an interesting way you do these. Those that do a lot of this stuff would already know. But you need to find out which is positive, which is negative, and it's not real obvious. So I'm going to show you how I did that. Okay, we're going to take a close-up on this. And if you look right there, if you can see it right there, it says plus. That doesn't tell you whether it's this one or this one that you should be hooking it up. Now these things, I think they're rated for 50 volts reverse. And you're only putting about 32 to 34 into them. So I guess it would survive it, it just wouldn't work. But I kind of thought it'd be nice to do it right to start with. So what I do, you probably heard that little meter beep. I'm going to take and go to the positive right here, because that's the closest to that positive. Okay, now I know that this one here is the one that's positive because I get continuity in it. Now if I go to here, I don't get anything, but to here again I get continuity. So that's my positive, and that will be the red wire from the driver. Okay, I've got this light working, and you can see it's bright. The camera kind of compensates for us. It's really bright. This is 50 watt, by the way. This is warm white, so it's kind of a yellowish, which that's how that usually looks. Okay, now you can see my fancy Super Wazoo heat sink back there, made out of that old casting. Every one of these I've ever done, if it's over 30 watt, I've had to put a fan on. I've had heat sinks on them. I've had pretty good size heat sinks on them, and I still have to put a fan. So let's find out if we're going to need a fan on this one. I'm going to turn this over and I'll show you where I got a temperature probe. Okay, just to kind of orient you a bit, here's the driver right here. I'm pretty much done. All I need to do is put a cover over this. And I've got a temperature probe right underneath this insulation here. Now I'm going to show you what the temperature is on this thing. So we're at 100 well, it's climbing pretty fast here. I think I messed it up a little bit, but okay, it's like 146. This whole thing is well, it's untouchable. You can't touch the silly thing. That's too hot. I'm going to have to put a fan on this thing. And I'll show you what happens when I put the fan on. Just to give you an idea here, here's my insulation, and my probe's underneath there, and the light is right there. So, pretty hot. It's gone down some. I'm not sure why that is. Probably it's how tight that probe's on there. But say 145 degrees. So I'm going to put a fan on. Let's see what happens. Okay, just wanted to go over what happened when we put the fan on. So it's down to 116, and that's viable. So every one of these things, like I've said, I've had to have a fan on them. I'll show you how the fan was put on. Okay, I've turned it over. You see, I've just put the fan right here. Just a little bitty fan. Now, and it's blowing into the quote heat sink unquote. It's a 12 volt fan, and I'm running it off the driver, and the driver is 32 to 35 volts. So I can't run the fan directly off of it. So see if I can show you what I did. Okay, I've got one wire from the fan going just straight to the LED. The other one goes through this resistor I put in right there. Let's get a little closer on it. That little resistor right there, that's 500 ohm resistor, and brings my voltage down to right at 12 to 13 volts. So that's all I did to make this thing work. The only thing I've got left to do is put a cover over the driver, and then it's done. Okay, I'm showing you here just going straight into the light, and of course the camera has adjusted its light way down. Now what I'm doing here, I have put a like a sunglass material between it. The reason I put that sunglass material in there is I want to be sure all those LEDs are firing. And I think you can pretty much tell. Okay, you can see every one of those are firing. I have had a couple of these that I got, and they were, there's a couple of LEDs didn't light in them. But this stuff's all from China. You have to order it straight from China. That's why it's so cheap. They actually sell it to you cheaper than what the postage would be. This is, it's a simple little way to change over to LEDs if you're handy and you want to do it. It is definitely not UL approved or any of those wonderful things, but it does work, and it's kind of an interesting idea. LEDs will use around 20% of what something like a halogen light would use, and put out pretty much the same light. I'm not sure it's quite that high, but it probably is. It's just a little different light. So anyway, that's what I did.